The site of Chavin is located at the confluence of two rivers, which brings to mind Tinku, which means the opposing forces joining together to create one. In this case, it would be particularly a place where the natural world and the supernatural world also join. The location was also limited in terms of access. You were forced to come in only one way. It was controlled by the landscape, and this ensured the most dramatic view. It also ensured that you would be carefully directed through your visiting experience at Chavin. The site of Chavin is also aligned very carefully to the four directions. You can find on both of my diagrams an arrow marking north to the right side of the images. The diagram on the left shows us up here also. This is the Andean cross, the cross of the four directions, and that is the original location of the Lanzan, which was facing east and also facing the Sunken Plaza and in particular the Sunken Court within that plaza. The Lanzan, just as a reminder, and we have a detail of it here, is a composite. It is a human form or a humanoid form with a feline head. That feline head is decidedly jaguar, and we can determine that because of the curling spots. We're going to see this again in a moment. Right up here, this is going to reference jaguar, but with the confusing nature of Chavin imagery, those spots morph into a serpent form as well, suggesting again duality and also a contour rivalry, the ability of an image to be read in multiple ways. The jaguar is an incredible predator from the Amazon, from the jungle, and was renowned for its strength, and to the folks at Chavin de Huantar, I think its spiritual power. When the old temple was expanded, it was necessary to maintain the emphasis, at least architecturally, on the main cult image, and that was, of course, the Lanzan. In my image on the right, my diagram, you can see the original old temple, which was also a U-shaped structure, and the Lanzan would have been in the heart of that, at the very core of it. Because of the popularity of the pilgrimage site of Chavin de Huantar, it was necessary to expand the temple, and you can see the expansion out here to kind of counter the development on that side of the building. There was renewed interest placed in the sunken court, and that's what we're going to take a look at in just 1 second. The sunken court was a circular shape with a series of relief carvings that went around the edges of that. You, if you were inside of it, would have on both sides, and think duality, both sides, essentially mirror images that you could see from the right and also from the left. And as you stand there facing the structure, you are facing in the direction of west. The images that appear on the bottom are of jaguars, and I have a sample of one at the top of the screen for you, top right, for you to take a look at. They are relief carvings, and in terms of style, they're incredibly precise, very linear. They are profile composites, and I'm saying that because they are taloned jaguars. The jaguar, of course, a great predator from the Amazon, but the harpy eagle also a great predator bird. So we have earth, we have underworld, we have sky combining together. The taloned jaguars would represent full transformation as a shaman, an individual attempting to take an hallucinogenic substance and travel to another realm. The goal would be to turn into a jaguar, or at least be guided on your destination by the jaguar. So the jaguar, the taloned jaguar then, is the goal, and those jaguars are located right down here in the lowest level, and I would like to suggest that that places them closest to the earth and to spiritual power and to the underworld. Above them, there were a series, and we have some of them left in position. Not all of them are still standing. These relief carved images were of essentially marching shamans. By the term shaman, I'm talking about anybody who went here who was allowed to engage in the ritual that would have allowed them to transform through a consumption of an hallucinogen, and therefore hopefully to approach the Lanzan. So these folks are marching shamans in the process of transformation, and some of them actually are shown with strombus shells, and others are shown, only a couple of them, and think duality again. Two of them are shown with San Pedro cactus. Let's take a look at them. They are profile and frontal poses. Here we have one of our marching figures, and it does seem that this perhaps represents a ritual procession that was taking place as part of the activities at Chavin de Wantar. This individual in the procession is matched by a figure on the opposite side, and both of them are carrying San Pedro cactus. In the case of the San Pedro, it does appear to be replacing a staff, so it becomes an image of authority, but it also, San Pedro, also is an object that would have been used as a potent hallucinogen to help you to travel to the realm, the other side, essentially, to the enhanced reality, to the realm of the supernatural. We have a typical Chavin figure with crossed fangs, an eye that has a pendant iris. We also have talons, so it is a hybrid. It's a human form, but it is also morphing into a jaguar, and at the same time we have the potent energy and visionary power, and perhaps the idea of flight that's associated with the harpy eagle, or with any great raptor that could be linked with the Amazonian region. These relief carvings were panels that made up a retaining wall to help to hold back the earth to maintain the shape of the sunken circular plaza, and it was fairly impressive in size. It had a diameter of around 66 feet, and it also maintained an east-west axis that was marked in darker stones on the paved floor. That axis would lead us directly to the Lanzan. Now, in this sunken circular plaza, of course, you can't see the Lanzan, and that is part of the whole scenario of Chavin de Wantar, reminding us of the invisible presence of the Lanzan inside. The building itself is a true temple, and by that I do mean it is a place that would house the divine. And in this case, it would be the premier Chavin deity we think is represented in the Lanzan. I would like you to know this object because it's located in the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. It's currently on view, and you can get a look at it. Penn is currently open for visits. It is also directly from Chavin. It is associated very closely with Chavin, and it is a jaguar vessel. If we were in the territory of the Aztecs, you might be thinking, and you can look at the opening, it does have a depression in the back. It did hold something. If it was Aztec, you might suspect it once upon a time held human hearts. Here, however, for Chavin, it was a container where hallucinogenic substances would have been ground. So you can think mortar and pestle essentially operating here. Hallucinogens would have been one of the features of shamanism in Peru, and this would have been one of the implements, part of the toolkit essentially, of creating the visionary experience for the folks who went to Chavin de Wantar. This is also a pretty cool object. It is very severe. It is very powerful. It has an angular quality to its outline, and that suggests a connection between stone carving and textiles. There are also at the same time curving lines that make up a component of Chavin as well. It also has the crossed fangs that we've come to expect with Chavin, a kind of blunt nose, flattened nose. If you look at the eyes, I think you can see that once upon a time they would have been inlaid, and that would have added to, particularly if this was used in a ritual with flickering light, would have added to the spiritual power of the object. So a pretty cool image of a feline, definitely a jaguar, and you can find on the body of our jaguar some curling forms that help to make it clear that this is the jungle cat, not the highland puma, which does not have spots. If you look closely, you will also see some Andean crosses that are located on our jaguar. A closer look at our pen kitty cat. If you go over to the lower right, you're going to be able to see some of those Andean crosses a little more clearly. And in particular, we get a pretty nice jaguar spot located right there, but kind of curling, swerving forms. I did need to at least make you aware that there is an issue of diffusionism in the New World in the area of Chavin and also in Peru in general. By diffusionism, I'm talking about the theory that some folks have put forward that it was in fact the Old World that seeded the New World and its cultures. There have been repeated suggestions made that New World cultures rose to prominence because of visits from folks who came from the Old World. And I have one of the classic examples of this. It is our Chavin jaguar, and the lower left and right, and then in the top left, what we're looking at is actually a Chinese example. It comes from the Shang dynasty, a dynasty that did in fact exist before Chavin. But you can see, I think, from looking at it, a similarity in terms of design, including spiraling shapes, relatively rigid profile, formal frontal, and the subject matter as well. The theory has been proposed that objects like this from China are proof or evidence of the cloning, essentially, of culture in the New World. I do at least need you to hear this. As far as the archaeological community goes, there is absolutely positively no evidence that anyone from outside came here and brought influences with them. Everything was developed in the New World. Yes, of course, when people come in from the Old World, let's say the land bridge route, they're bringing with them their heritage, which includes notions of shamanism and almost certainly of a world tree, of the layered universe at the very least. That's being brought. But once that is taken here and planted, it is a totally local development. The problem with the theories of diffusionism is that, again, it suggests unconscious biases against the people of the New World, with the suggestion that perhaps they just couldn't have done it on their own. Based on archaeological evidence, we do believe, in fact, everything that we find in North America, Mesoamerica, and South America is indeed indigenous. We will touch on bias again when we get to North America, where it is even going to be stronger and I think easier to observe. We're looking at a classic example of coastal Chavin style. It comes from the north coast, and it is in the culture of Tembladera. It shows us the common belief system that in the early horizon was shared by coast as well as highlands, and it is ultimately linked together with Chavin. What we have here is a spotted feline. It is a jaguar, but what I would also like you to be able to observe as we turn it sideways is a San Pedro cactus. And next to that San Pedro is the steppe and the wave, the classic image of Andean duality. Okay, another view of our ceramic vessel, and in this case I've given you a real jaguar to look at so that you can see what the spots of a jaguar might resemble, and that would include a circle, sometimes with a spot within it, and that is indeed what our kitty cat is wearing. There are those who have looked at a San Pedro cactus and also suggested that it may indeed be viewed as a kind of axis mundi or a world tree. If you slice it in half, indeed it references the Chicana with a central hole, a pillar spot for the axis mundi, and indeed it might be parallel.